For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Hauer, co-founder of the Garage Group, investor at HauerX, and then founder of the Courageous Minds Only community. And if you're not familiar with the Garage Group, really our mission there is helping courageous leaders keep their brand portfolios, product portfolios relevant in the face of uncertainty and help them continue to grow. And then from a Courageous Minds Only community, we created as a platform to give leaders courage, inspiration, and ideas for basically creating the future in an uncertain world. And the platforms like this, to hear authentic conversations like we're going to hear tonight, are a lot of the fuel behind kind of chasing big ideas, getting through failure, and that sort of thing, continuing to push yourself forward. So super excited about the conversation we're going to have tonight. An outstanding panel. We're going to go a little bit we'll kind of dig into their background, so I'm not going to read their full bios, or we'll be up here for an hour. But really quick, David Wong, Executive Director of Innovation and Growth at CME Group. Dujon Smith, Global Program Manager, Black Founders Program at Accenture. Karen Voelker, Director and Google Cloud Innovation Practice Lead. And then Kevin Willer, Partner, Chicago Ventures. And if you've been to one of these events before, you've heard this from me, but I say it every time. These kind of conversations can be really impactful for you if you have the mentality to come here and really take an insight that you're gonna really apply to your life and start really tomorrow applying it and not stop and continue to compound that, right? There's going to be a lot of lessons learned, shared here, advice, et cetera, in terms of how you navigate uncertainty, continue to push yourself forward, et cetera. So just listen intently, but try to find one thing through the conversation that you'll commit to kind of applying as you walk out of here. And Stephanie at the end here will remind you as well on that. So but it's kind of a big deal. We're going to dive into the conversation for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A. If you're virtual, you want to throw questions in the chat, we'll be able to see them. And then here live, we'll field questions as well. So does it sound good? All right. Let's dive in, start to get to know the four of you a little bit. We'll obviously get into your backgrounds in a minute, but wanted to start out Courageous Minds Only fashion by, and we'll go deep here quick, but what's a courageous moment where maybe your back was against the wall, or you maybe weren't as confident, but you had to lean into something and push an idea forward? You had a pivot in your career, you started a new role, and it's something that was kind of impactful on you. Dujon, you want to start, man?
Wow, I get to be the first one to speak. I would say for me, it was probably in the midst of the pandemic, working at Accenture, which is a wonderful organization with 700,000 people around the world, and thinking about being in a pandemic, COVID, George Floyd is going on, and I'm transitioning in my career from being our Midwest lead for Accenture Ventures to leading this new program called the Accenture Black Founders Development Program. So huge shift in going from more of an innovation practitioner sort of role to this hybrid corporate venture capitalist sales guy. So that was very hard, I'd say, to transition to that space, because you're leading in an organization, you're trying to make change and make sure that everyone understands the importance of why this program even exists. Accenture was the only professional services organization to create a program for founders calling out a specific ethnic group, which is also, something very interesting and different from what else has happened in the marketplace. Yes, shout out to Accenture for that, because they saw the need. They've been doing the research for 5 years, seeing that 1% of VC funds is still going to Black founders even today in 2023. So to be a face of that, both internally and externally, and being kind of held accountable internally and externally to the commitments that were made to ensure that your organization is not looking performative, but action-oriented, is a lot to take on. So I had to put on my courageous mindset to be a leader or a co-leader in that space.
Awesome. Kevin, how about you, man?
I feel like you come over here. We should go first, but all right, I'll go quick because my name's up on the screen. Hi, everybody. Kevin Willer. This is a real easy one. I was at Google for a decade. I helped start their office in Chicago when we were schlepping keywords and trying to build an ad business back in late 2000. Was there for a decade, and then I left there to help start this place. And when I left, everybody was like, "You're nuts. Why would you leave Google, like one of the great companies in the world, and go work on essentially it's a smallish nonprofit. I mean, it's a nonprofit business and still is to this day." And we had some good partners along the way. Now Governor J.B. Pritzker was a big visionary for this whole place and helped seed it and get it going. And so Nick in the back from IIT, he helped get this going. All the universities around town, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs. We just had a great partnership with it. But it was, it was a non-traditional way to advance my career. And it was the best 2 years of my life. We built the plan over 2011, and then we opened in 2012. And then I went into venture capital full time in 2013. But those 2 years were the best 2 years of my career. Just so much fun. I think we made a big impact, and at least the place is still open today. So I'm very proud of that.
There you go. Karen, how about you?
Mine's going to be similar. I recently had a big job change. So I was with Accenture for 21 years. Dujon and I worked closely together. And 7 months ago, decided to leave my only job that I've ever had and go join Google Cloud. And I honestly felt like I had the best job at Accenture. And I had the best team, and I was walking away from all of that. But I had a really great opportunity in front of me. And I will talk more about that later, but it took a lot of courage to leave.
David, how about you, man?
So mine was a little bit more like seated in dissatisfaction. So I was responsible for business strategy at CME Group. I've been there now 17 years at banks and consulting before that, and was really dissatisfied with our inability to do things new, and was quite frankly complaining about it with other people. And ultimately is probably 2012. Julie Winkler, who I still work for, we're complaining to each other, to be completely transparent. And she said, "Why don't you just write something down? Let's see what we can do with this." And ultimately, that drove us to put together what is now what very quickly, or not quickly, but over about a year, became the Innovation Lab. And that was a big change for me, to go from a very clear path with leading business strategy to something new that no one really understood what it was. No one really had the agreement on what innovation was, and no one knew what we were going to do. But we put together a clear point of view, clear perspective. We had some clear people that we were trying to follow, and 10 years, a little over 10 years now, we've been very successful in it. So it's been exciting, but it was terrifying.
Getting to know the four of you a little bit, just in prep, and David, obviously we've known each other for a while. I feel like this theme of serially refounding your careers all kept coming up, and each of you just shared like an inflection point. I want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of some of the shifts and your mindset and all that. But just so for the context for the audience here, can you just share just kind of quick thumbnail in terms of the kind of arc of your careers? Because I think, like Kevin, obviously you've been a number of different places, and then Karen, you've had kind of long track record at Accenture, obviously, but just have a lot of different roles and impact. And so I think I think sharing that context, I think it'll be helpful. And then I'd love to dive into some of the changes there. Karen, you want to start?
Yeah. I started as an intern with Anderson Consulting, and then joined right out of university. I went to Bradley University, did typical, I would say, management consulting, strategy consulting for about 7 years. And then I got staffed on a team called the Accenture Customer Innovation Network, or ACIN, as some of people may know it, which was an innovation group in a physical space that focused on the retail and consumer goods industry. We're kind of the black sheep within Accenture. I would say innovation in general was for a while. And so that's probably a lot of what I would be talking about. So I started there, ended up taking over the Chicago facility, then taking over the team globally. And then in my last 3 years at Accenture, I also took over Midwest Innovation, and I read retail innovation globally. So my background is deep in industry innovation.
David, how about you, man?
I started mowing lawns. So
I love it.
mowed
Go
lawns,
back.
worked
Way
at a
back.
deli, worked at a teller. Like I've as soon as I turned 14, I got a job permit, and so that's been my grind. In college, I was a Miller Lite rep. So anyone drinking Miller Lite, good job. And so my first real job was at Deloitte, doing management consulting and in risk management. And that was really exciting. I think that put me in a position where I got thrown into situations that I really never should have had any sort of say in, but did. And we could talk a little bit about that, but the one that really sticks out at me is Slovakia. So I'll say more later. First year. So then got an opportunity to work at ABN AMRO LaSalle Bank in North America. Got a job that I never should have gotten. I should have had twice as much experience as I had, but just because of who I had relationships with, who I had worked with, and who I had trust with, I got this wonderful job and got an awesome opportunity there. Got kind of attracted into CME by like this exchange that was this floor that a lot of people yelled on. They were starting to hit the headlines. They were starting to see some growth. There's about 400 people when I joined, and led enterprise risk management and built an enterprise risk management from scratch, a program from scratch for the exchange. Obviously, really important as we continue to grow as a public company. Lived through the board of trade, lived through the NYMEX, lived through Next, et cetera. A bunch of transactions. Eventually, was one point chief of staff to our former CEO. Got the opportunity to then lead business strategy, which was, I thought, my dream job. That was my dream job. This was going to be it. And then innovation lab and iterations of since then for about the last 10 years.
Awesome, man. Dujon?
I love experiencing different people, places, and cultures. My first real job was working for a startup LED manufacturer when I was living in Shanghai called Etrulum. Then I became a parliamentary researcher for the House of Commons in the UK. Tax accountant for Deloitte in the UK, loved London, hated tax, did a complete 180, got into the entertainment industry. My cousin owned a casting agency that started The Bachelor, The Amazing Grace. So worked with CBS, Viacom, ABC. Then I was like, I need to make a little bit more money, get back to my finance and accounting roots. Ran collateral management for a $25 billion hedge fund in Los Angeles. 2016, packed my bags, left LA. I don't know why. Came back to the windy city of Chicago and started here at 1871 with Kevin right here in the second row, working on a small innovation team at Accenture, navigated through, and here we are in 2023, and I lead Accenture's Black Founders Development Program.
Amazing.
I don't even know how to follow that. That's amazing. That's so impressive. But I like the speed. All right, let's do the speed round. Graduated Boston College, went to work on a dude ranch instead of going to Wall Street. I had a job on Wall Street. I was like, it doesn't feel right. Went to work on a dude ranch. Came home, wanted to get in tech in Chicago. I'm going to age myself in 96. The only tech in Chicago at the time was Motorola or US Robotics. If anybody remembers that company, they made modems that got you on the internet. We had the Palm Pilot, which is precursor to the iPhone and all that. Anyway, was there for a couple of years, ups and downs, mergers, acquisitions, went to work for some incubators. It all fell apart with the dot-com bust, and I got an opportunity to join this search engine out of Mountain View, California, to open a little business office here, as I talked about before. So I was with Google for the early years and the painful years, and then we went public and got bigger, and it was great. But over the years, I got to know a lot of folks in Chicago, and was doing some angel investing and getting involved in the startup community, which was really kind of the wilderness back then, as people will remember. Like, there's Grubhub and Fieldglass and CleverSafe and Braintree, but like they were all just building. They had no support system really. And so JP Pritzker said, hey, we should build a place for these entrepreneurs. And he kind of kicked off a group and recruited me to work on it over a couple of years to build this place. So did this for 2 years. My wife's like, it's never going to get any better than it is right now after the first year. The first year was amazing. It was working. I'm like, I'm going to go in venture capital full time. So Chicago Ventures, our office is literally above us in the space. We're 4 funds now, about $60 million each fund. We've invested in about 100 companies over the last decade. Cameo, Project 44, Spot Hero, or some you might recognize. And then during COVID, last thing, I started itching to scratch, I guess. I always wanted to, scratching an itch, sorry. I thought I always wanted to invest in pro sports. And I got an opportunity and I'm a big soccer guy, invest in a couple of pro sports teams. And I've been geeking out on that a little bit on the side. So I guess that's it.
Like I said, they're all very impressive. This is great. Interviewing Beth Comstock a few years ago, she said something, I think it's in her book too, but it's stuck with me. And it's what holds all of us back really is fear. It's the attachment to the old, to what we know. And what struck me about talking to all 4 of you is you basically have, throughout your careers, have taken a sledgehammer to fear. And I'm curious because I think whether you're in a new context because you've been forced to and or you want to, I think it's a pervasive theme for culture right now. Just a lot of transition, a lot of changes, tech or whatever, right? But I'm curious, like, what are the insights or what are the things that led you all to make the changes, whether it's seeking that next new opportunity within existing and or pushing yourself to take on new opportunities? Anybody want to dive in on that one? You go.
For me, it's just been being on this constant journey to find my passion, purpose, intersection point. And that was instilled in me in academia. I did my undergrad at Pepperdine studying international business, nonprofit management, and accounting. And then I got my law degree at Northwestern. And for me, any career opportunity, any job opportunity, anything at all, any volunteer opportunity, like how can this allow me to operate out of the intersection of my passion, my purpose, and checking in with myself periodically. I view my career, my journey as like various Netflix series stories. I can always go back to the writer's room. If I don't like where the story is going, I'm going to pivot and do something else. And I think that's where it's been easier for me to limit the fear, to say, all right, Dujon, if you were in casting, you can pivot back to asset management and go into private equity. You can go into corporate venture capital. You can go back to you can do whatever you want as long as you are checking in with yourself and seeing each season, is this getting you even closer to that perfect intersection point for yourself?
What I think a lot of people might kind of meander through life and not even nail that framework or the foundation. Like, how did you get there? And has it changed over time, or how did you nail that early?
For me, I mean, from when I was young, it's always been about purpose, service, and leadership in anything that I've been doing. So it was instilled earlier on. I would say in the early parts of my career, I was more focused on student loans, bills, taking care of family. And then obviously with the pandemic and other things, you're like, okay, I am not going to spend 40, 60, 80 hours a week doing this if it's not bringing me joy. And I'm very happy that we've had over the last 3 years more conversations around mental health, resiliency within the workplace, so that people can say, hey, why? I don't need to put up with this anymore. If this is not bringing me joy, if this is not allowing me to make an impact on the community that I care about, then bye, I'm leaving this. So for me specifically, I knew that I was passionate about creating space and opportunity for entrepreneurs of color, from underrepresented background, people who are historically excluded, women and minorities. And then two, I knew I was passionate about people, places, and cultures and traveling. I've had the unique opportunity to go to 55 countries over the last 15 years of my career. So anytime that I look at new opportunities, new roles, new board seats, or anything like that, I'm like, okay, does this align? And is this bringing me joy? And is this allowing me to make the impact that I want to? Check, check, check. Then yes. If not, I'm going to have to respectfully decline.
Yeah.
And that's how I move through the world.
Yeah. I love it, man.
Yeah.
David, how about you?
Ditto.
I love it. That's good. It's an easy answer.
I was too busy mentally taking notes of like, okay, purpose, passion. I think I can do this season. Awesome. Sorry.
I love it.
I wish my answer was that elegant. But for me, there's been a couple things that I think have helped with that. I'm not fearless by any means, and I don't even really consider myself all that courageous. But for me, there's a couple things. I think it was my grandfather. Someone at a young age taught me to take the path that gives you the most options. And so, like, literally, I learned options theory probably as like a 5-year-old. But it was just simple. Take the path that gives you the most options, gives you the most flexibility. That's why I was an accounting major in undergrad. That was the engineering of business, and that was really important. I'm glad that you're tax. I don't like tax, but that's by taking the path that gave you the most options. When a path didn't work, you had more options to go back to. So that really resonated with me. The other one was a practice that I started right after we're just starting the innovation lab, and I was trying to be googly, I guess maybe, or a little innovation-y. And I worked for a financial exchange, so it's a little difficult sometimes. And somehow I came up with this concept that anytime I felt myself physically leaning back, like, nah, I can't do that. That was the cue for myself to be like, all right, got to do it. So I've done so many things since implementing that practice. My best interview question ever. We were talking about, you know what? This is the innovation lab. We should ask people to draw a picture. That would be googly. And sure enough, both of us were like, no, we can't do that. And that was the indication we had to do it. So we asked everyone, like, here's a pen, here's a whiteboard wall, draw a picture, no alphanumerics of how you think you'll fit in this role. I have never gotten better answers and more crisper, clear answers in an interview question ever. And I continue to use it. And so it's those types of experiences that have compounded in this confidence to try something new and try something different. And I'll try everything at least once, and oftentimes more times, just because it's really, you get a wholly new perspective and experience once you've tried it. So that's been my tactic towards fear.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Kevin, how about you, man?
So my dad worked at Sears and Roebuck. You guys know Sears, Sears.com, for 25 years. Sears Tower. It was really cool when you were a kid because your dad worked in the tallest building in the world. I didn't really know what that meant. Anyway, Sears is pretty much gone now, which is really sad and unfortunate, but he was there forever. And I thought growing up, you had to be at the same company forever because he was successful at a company, so I should do that. And my career has not been that way at all. Though, I mean, being at Google for 10 years, that was a really long time to be there. It's such a great company, obviously. And like, I still love the place and would go back in a heartbeat, I think, because it's such an incredible culture. But the thing they did there was they made it feel like a new company every year. And we were growing a lot. That was cool. But it was more, they do like reorgs all the time. You just could like, it was like clockwork. You just knew a reorg was coming. And it wasn't because we weren't performing. We were performing usually really well. It was because they just wanted to keep us fresh, right? They encouraged us to move around the country, around the world into different roles and different opportunities. And I love that about it. On the flip side, though, I've had friends that have stayed there too long and they haven't been able to get out of the place. They're so afraid to leave. The fear, because it's such a great company, must have been hard to leave Accenture. I mean, after such a great run there. So it's like, but you went to Google. So I guess that was a little easier. The reality is it's never easy to make these changes. But when you, to your point of like, when you start, kind of getting a little, set in your ways, you got to change it up. Where you go is up to you. I think it's based on your risk profile, right? Like, coming to 827 was risky. Doing venture capital in Chicago for the last decade actually has been risky. And we've had a lot of, do you hear those companies I mentioned earlier? Those are the companies that have done really well. I didn't tell you the ones that didn't do well. If you want to know those, I can show them to you later. But like, we don't talk about those, but we've had a bunch of zeros, right? And so it's, as a venture capital investor, you don't just invest and show up at the board meeting usually. Anybody seen Super Pumped with like the Bill Gurley, Uber thing? Like, you're in these companies working with them very closely and you ride the ups and downs with these founders. I mean, I'm not saying we're the founders. I'm just saying we're along for the ride and trying to help. And it's really brutal and emotionally draining over a long period of time.
Like, I'm curious in terms of already, like, I'm just assuming super busy on the VC side in terms of getting into the sports investing side of things. Like, what like, walk us through that a little bit. Like, what led to you kind of saying, "Hey, I'm ready to do this." I don't know, it was COVID. It was working at home. I mean, the venture world slowed down a little bit during COVID, right? You were trying to keep your companies alive, just make sure they had enough runway, and there weren't a lot of new investments being made. Things slowed down a bit. 21 was amazing. 22 was really, really bad. And 23, we'll see how it goes. But the reality is I always wanted to do it. Like you were talking about, mission. Like, I went to a high school in our Loyola Academy, and our slogan was Men and Women for Others. And I did a lot of service work in high school. And I was like, I'm going to run a nonprofit one day. Like, I knew I was going to do it. I just thought I'd do it when I was like really old, like, when I was retiring. And I did it halfway through my career because I wanted to make an impact. And I wanted to give back and all that. I'm not hitting your sports question, sorry. But like, the impact piece. It's almost like it was there all along. It was just the time and the space almost is what I'm hearing. Like,
you just have to get the opportunity put in front of you. And that, to fill it in, the sports thing was, I started asking about it, and then you get opportunities. It's like venture capital. Founders start coming to you, team owners start coming to you. They say, we're raising money. And you decide if you want to invest or not. You do your diligence and hope for the best. Yeah.
Karen, how about you?
I was going to say asking is huge because people do not know what you're interested in, what you're thinking about. So putting yourself out there and even having the courage to say, hey, I want something different. I'm really interested in this. Can you help me? Was extremely pivotal in my career.
They don't ask. They're not going to come at. You're a successful executive. Why
No,
wouldn't
I
they ask if
remember
you're-
I had been a senior manager forever at Accenture because innovation was not a recognized career path at Accenture. And so everyone's like, you can't make managing director. But why? Like, why can't I? And they're like, well, you don't have sales. And I'm like, but I do. It's just different than what your role is, your model. And I remember I kept hitting door after door of saying, I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it. But I had little kids at the time. I loved my job. And I was like, okay, you can just stick this out for a little bit longer. But then I just kept asking. And for me, it was finding the right person at the right level that could actually listen and make a change. So finally, and someone's like, Karen, no one's going to ask you to be a managing director. You have to tell them that you're ready. You have to ask them. And the person was like, okay, we can't do it this year. You're late to the process. I'm like, well, that's fine. But I'm going to lay out with you what I need to see from you from the next year. And I'm going to make connections to make that happen. A year later, I made managing director. Now that person left and went to Google Cloud. And some of my other most favorite mentors at Accenture also went. And so I just started to become curious because I'm going to go back to I'm going to backtrack a little bit too. I was told about 7 years into my career, Karen, you're not the first person I call. You're always the second person. And they're telling me that as like a bad thing because I had jumped around in that 7 years. I didn't focus on anything. And I'm like, I'm at Accenture. Aren't you supposed to try new things and do things? And I liked that I was the second person. And so I look back at that and I actually think me being that generalist for a while is actually why I've succeeded. And there's a book by David Epstein it's called Range, Why Generalists Thrive in a Specialized World. At that point, I had pivoted then into innovation. I mean, what's innovation though, right? It's really interesting to define.
I can explain it.
I mean, I've been doing it for 15 years, but yes, I've now specialized in innovation and in certain industries, but it's still kind of being a generalist and constantly being curious, constantly learning, constantly asking why, which not everyone is okay doing that. And just sometimes my husband hates it. I'm telling you at home, it doesn't always work, but I'm like, why are you not taking the trash out tonight and you're doing it tomorrow? Everyone else does it tonight. And you're just like, because that's me. But I also would say surrounding myself by people that inspire me and motivate me has been big for me. And I think I was looking back at changing careers. I was getting a little comfortable. I had a great job. I had just taken over a huge team, which was a big different responsibility and things like that, but it was still a little bit the same and the same people over and over and over again. And so I think switching allowed me to just change my mindset, do things a little bit differently, still be challenged, but I did have a little bit of a safety net, right? I had some of my favorite people that I knew and trusted and being able to change that I could go to. So that did help me.
As you reflect on the different shifts and changes you've all made, what do you feel like you learned about yourself and or skills you built as you made these different transitions and put yourself into different places?
One that I figured out, luckily pretty early, that I'm a much better builder and creator than I am a maintainer. And that's helped me a lot. And it's been challenging in a place where, so I've now been in the same role almost 10 years. But what I've done, the way I've accounted for that is I've constantly created new things, and I've kind of got rid of old things. And so it's always something new, because that feeds to my strength of being a builder and a creator versus a maintainer. So that'd be the first thing that jumps to my mind.
It sounded like some of your comments before was you're your boss is a partner in that too, in terms of creating the space. And so that's interesting for sure, man, just to be able to like have the right people around you, right?
We've all been influenced by people we've worked with, and you know, I give Julie and others I've worked with a ton of credit for who I am now, because they gave the space, the confidence, the trust, the autonomy, which is a really important piece. I'm recognizing more and more now that when people have autonomy and some rails, doesn't have to be narrow rails, but some rails, it's a pretty good recipe for success. And I've been a benefactor of that.
When did you find out, or how did you find out you were a builder and creator?
I don't know. I think probably at one point I was trying to maintain something. I was like, I'm not very good at this, so I'm going to go back to just building and creating. That's the short answer.
Yeah, got it. Dujon?
I would say I probably have learned similar. I'm a relationship builder and an executor. I love being thrown into various new environments and spaces and trying to navigate through them effectively, if that makes sense. And I think in that, you know, growing up, you hear about all the boilerplate careers. You're going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And in myself, being a yes man and saying yes to many opportunities and exposing myself to other career paths, other opportunities that have been out there, it's been great. Like I always say, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called In Search of One Yes, because these yeses have led to amazing things that have totally transformed my life and taken me down some amazing, amazing pathways. And in saying yes and getting that access and exposure, navigating the space, building the right relationships with people that Karen was talking about, finding those sponsors, those mentors, those advisors that have then created spaces for you to elevate and grow in your career has been so beneficial for then me to reach back and do that same thing for others.
As a Garage Group team, we've been talking a lot about, like, if you have the courage to take on a challenge, whether you persevere and or fail and learn from it, it creates resilience.
Yeah.
And then that compounds as you go. Have you felt that in terms of, if you even reflect back on some of your early kind of challenges and things you took on, to where like that resilience in you is compounded? Do you feel that? Like,
oh, definitely. I would say, you know, just trying to be an entrepreneur and understanding that landscape and building something and it failing or not raising what I needed to and understanding the intricacies of that, but then still getting a patent and being like, yes, I did that. And then now being in this role where I'm serving underrepresented entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs. I'm like, I know your experience. I was there once. And then building that resilience of learning what I've learned at Accenture, going back to law school in the midst of the pandemic. That was my pandemic project, as I like to call it. Like everyone was like, why are you going to law school? Like, you already have this job, you're in this space. But for me, being this person I am, I'm like, I want to be a triple threat. I want to know business, tech, and law, and be able to practice that in the venture capital space. Because look, we're looking at term sheets. We're talking about intellectual property, how to value it, how to license it. If I know these words as well, then I can provide that same access and exposure to people who do not know that language, so I can say, hey, on this term sheet, that's standard versus that being not standard. Negotiate on that. And I think getting that language is one of the things that we learn a lot in any world that we work in. Sometimes just not having access to language can really affect the opportunities that you have in a plethora of spaces. So long story less long, yes, resilience has been built.
Karen, how about you?
I learned that we already talked a little bit about mentorship, but I want to hit on it a little bit more. Mentorship is not just about upwards mentorship, but I also seek people that are more junior than me and use them as mentors also. I had partnered up with Chicago Innovation and have a few mentees through that process. And that is probably one of my favorite things I look forward to every month. And those meetings are non-negotiable and moving, because also just getting a perspective for somebody outside of your current company and being able to talk openly and get advice and things like that has been enormous help for me. Also, I have learned that myself, I am much better as a leader than an individual contributor. I thrive on group collaboration, and I thrive on getting people together. One of my favorite saying, and the people in the audience that have been part of my teams are going to laugh, but you are doing something wrong if you're working by yourself. right? Like you should always get a peer review on what you're doing because everybody can build upon each other and make things better. And we can all learn as a person when we do that, right? It's not saying your work is bad. It's just how do we grow as an individual? And so when I moved over to Google Cloud, I went to having 0 people. And at Accenture, I think I had like 100. 150 at one point, and not direct, but on the team. And so for a couple months, it was very uncomfortable for me because I was like, oh, I had like 3 people on the team. It recently changed last week, so that's good. But those are probably some of the bigger things that I notice about myself in this change.
Yeah. How about you, Kevin?
Like having flashbacks of managing people at Google and like the good and the bad of it sometimes, right? Yes, right. Just 2 things I'd say is one, I like the saying yes to every kind of thing. When Google was growing up here, first, nobody knew us in 2000, 2001, 2002. Nobody would talk to us. Nobody ever heard of the company. They thought we'd be out of business in 6 months. I mean, it was that kind of thing. So we were trying to get people to know us. And then eventually people started really knowing us. Like, God, Google has an office here. And we had a leadership team. Nobody ran the place. And so the leadership team, people call us up and say, hey, will you come and speak at this thing? Or will you come and sit on the mayor's tech council, and will you do Chicago innovation stuff and like all this stuff? Everybody was like, no, that's not my job. My job is to, build business or run revenue or client success or whatever it is. I was like, I'll do it. And I just said yes to all these things. I ended up on like 10 nonprofit boards randomly. And it wasn't me. They didn't want me. They wanted the brand, right? And I was just the person who did it. But the network I got out of that was unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, it was showing up. You got to show up and be, I guess, friendly and kind. But I just would show up to things. I got this great network, and that was, I mean, honestly, like that's how I met JB eventually, and that's why I ended up here. I mean, but if I wasn't putting myself out there and saying yes to things and trying to build out my network and trying to get out there and not just be myopically focused on my job, I probably wouldn't have. I don't think I would have had the career I had. So. You gotta put yourself out there.
I'm going to add to that real quick. I asked someone on my team for feedback once, and she goes, I hate that you say yes to everything. Because I led a team and people would come to me and I'll be like, sure, I'll figure it out. And people would look at me and they'd be like, we have no capacity. How are we going to do this, Karen? And I'm like, we can get creative. Like, it doesn't have to be us. We can connect dots. We can do a little role. We can do this. And then she goes, but I realize that's why we have been successful as a team. So she's like, I want you to recognize, I appreciate it, but we need to talk about it as a team. But saying yes is huge. Yeah.
I would, so that resonates with me. And I, as I listen to us, at least for me, and I'm hearing elements of it from you, it's the confidence to go into, quite frankly, any type of situation and any type of environment and figure it out, and not have the, I don't know if I'll get it exactly right, but I've got the confidence to go in, break it down, take it apart, understand what matters, at least in the moment, and then do the next thing and do the next thing after that. And I found that if you have the confidence to just go in in face of uncertainty, and you have an ability to manage that uncertainty and navigate that uncertainty, it's incredible. It's the uncertainty that kills you, and it's because you're afraid of it. And so that's, at least for me, I'm hearing it from the 3 of you as well, that moving in is that's a big piece of it.
In the same way, when we were talking about resiliency with Dujon, do you feel like you've kind of built that up as you've taken risks at CME, and like now that confidence now to lean into uncertainty is there because of that, or where does that confidence come from for you? Yeah,
when you put yourself into those situations and you come out alive, and not just alive, but you made a big difference, you made a big impact. So something turned into something else, which turned into something else, which turned into Bitcoin futures, right? Like, that kind of that builds not just a confidence, but a resilience. One of my favorite YouTube videos, if you want some fun, watch Jaya Zhang's 100 days of rejection. And he literally tries to get rejected for 100 days. And that was one of the things that influenced me, and you become numb to it. And what you actually figure out, that it's actually not rejection. You grow, you're actually not really actually getting all that rejected. People are saying yes. It's not just you saying yes, but oftentimes when you ask, people will say yes to pretty crazy things. And so that's the resilience, and you just get a confidence. And I don't look at it as resilience. You get a confidence of how to navigate it.
Love it. One last quick question, and we're going to open it up for Q&A. So be thinking about your questions.
Can I just say
go for it.
one thing
Go
on
for
what
it.
you just said? So I was a seller at Google. I was a salesperson. That's what I was. We had to make money there. And I worked with big brands and all this, and salespeople sell, and they try and get to yes. That's what you're trying to get to, right? Get someone to say yes. And then I got into venture capital. Then turns out venture capital is the no business, right? Like actually a reporter at the Tribune, when I went into venture capital, she's like, don't be the venture capitalist that says no to anybody. I'm like, I'm going to say yes to everybody. And then I realized very quickly that the business is the no business. You just have to. You have to look at a lot of companies. So if there's any entrepreneurs out there, like, don't feel bad, because the reality is the job is to raise money from a bunch of people and then tell them you're going to give it to the best possible companies. But you have to look at, like, we look at 1,000 companies a year and we invest in maybe 10 of them. And then those are the numbers. And again, it's just very hard. So I got really good at saying no and like giving feedback, but just like saying no quickly and moving on, because like at first you're just afraid to say no all the time. And you're just like, I have to, right? And give them some feedback and give them some help.
So what's your number one tip for serially like refounding your career, like learning, growing, pushing yourself forward? Like if you're talking to the audience here of, obviously I'm sure some are as battle tested as you, and others it's like maybe somebody just took on a new job or an assignment and they're scared to death. Like what's your tip for encouraging them and to driving forward? Karen, you want to kick us off?
I would say having humility and being transparent. So I actually was prepping for this with one of the people that joined my team last week. And she told me, she's like, I really appreciate that you're a very transparent and open leader. Like, you tell me what you don't know and that you want to learn. And so I think that has also just been my leadership style and has helped me in my career.
Kevin?
Sorry, I was still listening to the answer and I was thinking about, what was the question?
Your number one tip for serially refounding your career.
So trends, like that's the one thing, like I shouldn't have gone to Wall Street. I should get into tech, because tech is growing up. I mean, I didn't know where it was going. Entrepreneurship in Chicago a decade ago was popping, was happening, right? And we've had a great run. So just trying to kind of look at where the next interesting things are. And I think has served me well. It's like, how do I get engaged in those things? Like, more recently, I would say in Chicago, like the whole world of cannabis is interesting. The whole world of gambling is interesting in the state. Things that hadn't happened before here. And the other thing I'll say is, if you're 34 and younger, you've never seen a downturn, which is kind of crazy in your career. I saw 10 in the first, I saw 2 in the first 10 years of my career. And so downturns are actually a great opportunity. Like that's a great opportunity to learn, maybe pivot, change it up, whatever. Because when things are great, it's hard to leave something. But now's a good time to be thinking about what's next, I think.
Dujon?
As I was saying earlier, I would say having those check-ins with yourself at whatever cadence works for you, quarterly, monthly, yearly, whatever it might be, and thinking about how your 5 Fs, your family, faith, friends, fitness, finances are all in alignment with your career, and making sure that you're pushing towards those goals.
I hope someone wrote that down.
We'll have a video clip of that. That's good. That's good.
I made this up on the fly with the 5 Fs. So ABC. That's mine. Is ABC is always be curious. And if you're always being curious, you're always going to find new things. When you find and get exposed to new things, you'll be curious about learning why or what or how or what's this connect to. That in my eyes is that's the constant recipe for continuing to iterate and grow, whether you're in a downturn or an upturn or whatever environment. And so always being curious, ABC.
Let's give these 4 a round of applause.
We have some virtual questions. You want to answer some virtual questions first?
Yeah. What's maybe go back and forth here.
Yeah.
What's the best way to find a reliable mentor? Karen, you kind of talked about the program you're in. She on our team is like just raving about that program, by the way. So maybe share that as maybe an example, at least for Chicago, but then maybe there's some other principles you can share.
Yeah, for Chicago, they have many different, or Chicago Innovation has multiple different innovation mentorships, one of them being a women's one. So I found that very valuable, and I've always had a lot of women mentors and actually mentored a lot of women. They also have a Black and ethnic one. And so some of those groups I have found to be successful when you're looking outside of your company. I will say, if the mentorship doesn't work, say it doesn't work and move on. Don't waste your time, because there's been some that haven't worked and there's been some that haven't, but also look for people that are not like you. So some of the people I've been paired with at Chicago Innovation, I would have never thought of talking to. And I'm kidding. We talk every week. And we both love the conversation. So just make sure you're not always looking for people like you, because that helps you push your boundaries.
I'll plug Chicago Innovation as well. I love that organization. The latter is for Black and Latinx. And then I did Ageless Innovators because I love intergenerational co-mentorship, which I think is very important. And then obviously, if you work for any corporation, leveraging the ERGs of those organizations that will hopefully have a mentorship program.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Let me give a quick, because you plugged Chicago Innovation, which I love. Margaret and Brett would kill me if I didn't plug the Executives Club of Chicago. The Executives Club of Chicago has a number of phenomenal mentorship programs. I've been involved for the last 17 years in the Leadership Circle mentorship program, where it's a group. And normally you don't think of as a group as a situation you want to be a mentor in, but I can't tell you how meaningful and how close group and peer mentorship has been in that context. And we still are constantly connecting.
Awesome. Do we have a mic here? Right here, blue shirt. Jeff's got you.
Hi guys, I'm Rod Kretschak. Thanks a lot for your time and your insight today. This is really cool. If you could go back in your career and make one decision differently about anything, what would it be and why? That's the questions for anyone who wants to answer.
I'll start. I waited way too long to start my first company, waiting to be ready enough versus recognizing that having kind of the courage to jump in, it would actually make me ready. So you got a lot of
I don't
perfect
have
people
one.
up here.
And
boss. Come on,
I
come
know
on.
that sounds weird, but I'm really grateful for what has happened in my career, and whether obviously a lot of good things have happened in each of our careers, but we also had the bad things we didn't really talk about. But I'm also grateful for those too. So I actually don't know if I'd change anything. I'm sure it would be go back and make someone, and I probably did something that made someone feel awful, and I might not have realized that. And if I could go back and somehow change that, I would do that.
So I would say I wish I had the courage earlier in my career to speak up more. When I told you I was a senior manager forever, it was forever. So I wish I would have pushed harder and not taking no for an answer sooner, because I think if I would have gotten the right people, I could have moved forward faster.
I would have gone global with Google. I left right before I would have done that. It just was like, I'm going to do this. And like you were talking about this global experience, I just didn't, I traveled for Google globally, but I didn't like go do a rotation. I didn't go like work in Europe or something. I would have done that.
Anything for you, man? No, you're good. All right. What's good?
Season 3.
How do you get people to, like, whether it's cross-functional teams or organization, to align around a vision? Like, and you're bringing folks together. Like, Dujon, you're dealing with that right now as you're trying to drive your program forward. But like, any thoughts on that, man?
Yeah. This is kind of like my day job all the time, bringing and coursing multiple parts of Accenture together to come together for one shared common goal. So at the end of the day, I just try to make sure how every person within that circle has skin in the game for what we're building, and how it can be mutually beneficial. That's where I kind of focus on, to make sure that everyone's going to allocate some time.
What's right here in the middle?
Hi, I'm Joanne. Thanks so much. I'm going to make an observation and then ask a question. So at the risk of maybe a little bit of an elephant in the room. We have one female and 3 males on the table. Female who stayed someplace for a really long time before making my courageous moves to do something else. And David, you said there are all these places you'd been where you had no business being there. You're like, 50% of the reason, like maybe it was 50% trained. And it's pretty well documented that males versus females, males read a job description and they have like 80%, they apply for the job, and women wait till they have 110%. So I'm not quite sure what my question is, except maybe, is there an observation there? Have I misobserved it? Are those articles all wrong? And for the, heavily female populated room, what's your advice to get females to get themselves, because I know I did that. I waited till I was 110%. I was afraid to ask until I was super sure I could do it all. And as soon as I took on I'll figure it out when I get there, little horse before the, cart before the horse. Like as soon as you're like, well, I'll ask and then I'll figure it out. As soon as you get that confidence, that's when it flips.
I would say one thing I've recognized is that, how do I want to say this? Females, sometimes we need to support each other. And I don't think we always do. I think we compete with each other. And that's a mentality that has to stop. Like we need to lift each other up. We have to support each other. People are not threatening you on your job, right? So like, I look at my team, and I had lots of females on my team prior and right now, and how do I set them up to take my job over? And in the past, I would have thought like, oh my God, I'm not doing that. I want to give up my job. They're going to fire me. But that's not what it's about. It's about growing all of us. So I do think as a female, taking on that ownership yourself and helping make that change. I will say, 80% of the time, I'm still the only female in a lot of calls. And I sit there and I'm like, oh, this has got to change. But we'll get there, and just keep speaking up.
I'd add one quick thing to that as well. You're right. It's happening. I'm happy, through Accenture Ventures, we invested in a company called Pipeline Equity, which is working on that as well. Even just changing the language of job descriptions has increased applicants, female BIPOC applicants, just through the roof. So that is a problem, and I'm glad that technology is now starting to come in to address some of those issues. But then I think personally, female, people of color, anything like that, there's still a lot of work that we have to do to unlearn certain behaviors, to unlearn limiting beliefs that we place on ourselves, imposter syndrome or anything like that, so that we can say to ourselves, why not me, more often, to apply to that job, to get in that space and to take up space as anyone else would.
Love it. Let's go online and then we'll come back here.
How do you say no?
Yeah, the saying yes versus no, prioritizing. How do you prioritize like the right things, but even prioritize check-ins with yourself so that you're able to then make sure you're setting the trajectory of your career up right? Like, anybody want to jump in there?
I nominate you.
Yeah. So I was saying earlier, we're at the yes. I say yes to things that are in alignment. So I have my checklist. Yes. Once I have my short list of what got the yes, then it's all around the prioritization based on my goals, both professionally, personally, and then, as I said, with my 5 Fs. Yeah. That's how I prioritize. That's how I get to that short list to then move forward.
I would just give the example of like running a small nonprofit is an interesting thing where you have limited resources. You have a very talented team. We still do have a very talented team, but you can't say yes to everything because you can't handle it. But you feel bad saying no because people want to help. It's like company X goes, I want to give you, a bunch of resources and people, and they'll work on all this stuff for you. And you're like, I don't even know how I'd manage that, right? So you feel bad saying no, but you have to ruthlessly prioritize what's important for the organization, has alignment with the goals and all that. I mean, it's a lot of yes, maybe later, let's keep in touch kind of thing, because you don't want to say no, we're not going to ever do this. But
a couple more. Let's keep going. Just wherever you're going. There you go.
Hi, my name is Michael. This question might be pointed a little bit more towards Dujon and to Kevin, specifically because of your community interactions with the city of Chicago and, lifting people up who live here. But where do we see Chicago growing over the next 5 to 10 years in terms of innovation, in terms of new companies? How do we become the next hub of innovation of, these founders? I was someone that came to 1871 a long time ago because my mom has a startup and knew some people here. But how do we become like a Silicon Valley or Seattle-esque expansion in the Midwest?
I'd start, but you get to comment too, right? You're there. There's a very long answer. It's a very good question. At a high level, we're working on it, right? Yeah, I mean, everybody in here, being part of this community right here is working on it, right? This stuff never happened a decade ago. It really didn't. P33 is actually working on it, funded by a lot of companies here, run by Brad Henderson and a great team of people to elevate Chicago and try and by 2033, hence the name, it's Plan 33, to get us to be a top 5 tech, hub in the country, in the world, whatever. We got a lot of work to do. The work that they're doing in 1871 is a big part of it. The work that, the venture world is doing, the work that we're doing at Chicago Blend that we helped found, which is getting more people into entrepreneurship, more people into venture capital, creating, a really strong, vibrant community of diverse founders here. The universities have such a big role in it. We got to keep our students here that we train at our great schools. So Discovery Partners Institute's part of that. So there's a lot of pieces to it. But I think the bottom line is we had a really good 10-year run. I mean, the last 10 years in Chicago have been nothing short of amazing. We have companies at every stage. And so we just got to spin the cycle now of talent and capital. So there's all these 20-somethings that are coming up that are playing leadership roles, which is great. So we got to recycle our talent and capital, but it's going to take a little while. So we got to be patient. 2033, we'll figure it out. Sorry.
Yeah, and I agree with everything that Kevin said. So also with that, I think Chicago has just such a unique opportunity. I've been to a lot of places. It's still one of my favorite cities in the world. We always talk about America, the great American melting pot. Chicago, for me, feels like a salad bowl when you look at how the city is set up and our neighborhoods. But we all bring our unique flavor and ingredient to what makes Chicago what it is. And I think there's a huge opportunity to continue to bridge the gap between the creative scene of Chicago and the tech scene. Because at the end of the day, we're all aligned and connected through the power of storytelling. So if you're out there as a playwright, telling your immigrant story, or you're building a cybersecurity company, what's still there? We still need that story. So I think Chicago has a unique opportunity with the 200, 300 plus theaters we have in this city on the south and west side and the north side, and then the tech community to really create something unique and differentiated compared to the coast.
I'm going to add on top of that, because you oftentimes forget about the role of corporations.
Yeah.
And Chicago is the center and the hub of so many incredible industries.
Yeah.
And you take the responsibility of the corporations really leaning into that ecosystem and playing a role in that ecosystem. I think it really becomes a flywheel.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, can we get a quick round of applause here?